So last tutorial we learned how to import a simple timer. Now I'm going to show you how to import a counter. So I'm going to go import class and I'm going to grab this counter object. Now the difference, you'll notice simple timer went down here whereas counter went here. A simple timer is not something you put on the screen. A counter is. If I hold down shift, you can see I can actually put a counter wherever I want. So what I'd like to do is have a counter, let's say up in the top corner, that basically counts how many starfish I have collected. Okay, so I'm going to go to my world and I'm going to make a counter. Now, in this case, if I do this, I'll just go here, add object new counter 50, 50, something like that. The placement might not be perfect, so let's check it out. Back to our game, and you can see there it is. So that's not exactly where I wanted it to be. The 50, 50 is the middle of the object, so I want it to be a little higher. So I'll raise that to a 20, and that's pretty good. Okay, here's what's a little different about the counter. So what I'm wanting to do is I want to alter the value of the counter, but not in here. I want to alter it in here. So every time the lobster picks up a starfish, I want to remove the starfish from the world, but I also want to add to the counter. So I go on this line and I'm thinking, okay, well, how do I add to the counter? The problem is the counter doesn't have a way to refer to it. It doesn't have a name. So this is the first object that you're going to see where we actually can't just do this. This just says, hey, make a new counter. Don't worry about what we call it. Just make a new counter and put it on the screen. But what I need is I need a way to refer to this counter. So I'm going to cut that and I'm going to go up top here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to make a new counter, but I'm going to give it a name. So let's call it counter, and this is counting the number of starfish, right? So I'm going to call it star count, like that. And you can call it anything you want. That's just a name that makes sense. And here I'm going to put a word in front of it that we'll talk about later, but I'm going to put the words public static. And the word public essentially means what you think. It means you are making it available to other classes. Well, what that means is, like, if I'm in a different class, if I'm in the lobster class, I can still change the value of star count, even though I'm not in this class, this world. Okay. So on this line right here, it says add object. Well, what am I adding? I want to add that new counter. What did I call it? I called it star count. So here, I'm going to say, okay, let's put star count on the screen. And if you're wondering, well, why didn't I have to do that with the lobster and the dolphin and the starfish? We could have, but we didn't really need to because we don't need to refer to those in other areas. We haven't needed to, like, edit the value of the lobster or the dolphin in other areas of the code. This is the first time that we do. We need to be able to say, hey, remember that thing called star count? Yeah, let's change it. And I'll show you what I mean. So now I'm going to go to lobster. And if we intersect with a starfish, we're going to remove the starfish, but then what we want to do is we want to go and say, hey, oops, we want to say, let's get, oh no, I was right. Let's go my world dot, and then I hit control space and star count just pops up. And what I want to do is star count is a counter. Now what can I do with a counter? There's all these things I can do. And one thing is add. And I want to add 1 to the score, like that. So this says, hey, there's a counter in my world. Its name is star count, and we're going to add 1 to it. So with any luck, that should work. Let's try it out. There we go. 1 and 2. And what you could imagine is it wouldn't be too much of a stretch. Actually, let's just do it. If I go here to world and I make lose world, and I'll give it a background while I'm at it, just so we know that it's a different world. Okay, so we have a world called lose world now, And what I could do, now that I have a counter, is every time I change the counter, I can say, well, if myWorld dot star count dot, and then I want to get the value. So if myWorld dot star count dot get value equals 2, then we could do something. Now, this is not a, I'm doing this example off the top of my head, which I shouldn't, because what I've just made lose world, which means if we get 2, we go to lose world, which it doesn't make any sense, but I'm just showing you how you can switch worlds. So to switch to the new world, I use Greenfoot's library, and in there, again, I'm hitting Control Space to get this. I can see one of the things is set world. And what world do I want to go to? I want to make a new lose world. So again, not a great example of game functionality, but if this works after I collect 2 starfish, you should see 1, there's 1, and now if I hit 2, there you go, new lose world. Okay, so that is how you get a score counter going for your... Oh, I just noticed one thing before I sign off. Notice how I forgot to reset it. If I want to reset it every single time, at the start of my game, that's right here, when I add star count to the screen, I should do a star count and then a control space, and I want to set the value at the start of the game to 0. So this says, hey, at the start of the game, make a new star count, add it to the screen, set the value to 0. So now, every time I reset, it should go back to 0. So you now know how to add a counter, a little bit about switching worlds, and good luck.